Welcome to Advus After Hours, a podcast focused on the intersection of innovation, finance, and community. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jeff Lee.
Hey there.
And today we sit down with Shawn Seipler, a social entrepreneur who has used his skills in business to fight hygiene-related deaths across the world. His company, Clean the World, has partnered with some of the world's largest enterprises, including Amazon, Hilton, the CDC, and many more to distribute hygiene-related products to communities in need. The communities in which they've operated in, they've lowered hygiene-related deaths by 60% and in turn have saved millions of lives. Shawn, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on Advus After Hours.
I met Shawn briefly back probably 8 or 9 years ago now. And I still remember going out to the airport, that Cheddar's Scratch Kitchen, Mark Rucker, he brought me along. You guys were doing a strategy session or some kind. And I ended up interning that year a little bit, and I was in the journalism school at Florida. So it was all social media, all that kind of stuff.
I remember that. That was, first of all, I remember it because Cheddar's is one of my favorite restaurants. Is it? So I remember everything that happened.
Nice.
We launched in 2009, and social media and marketing and branding and all that has been a key piece of everything we've done.
Absolutely.
So,
I remember
we were soaking interns up all day then.
Yeah, I think I made or started the first Instagram account. I was trying to go back the other day. There's thousands of posts now. I'm sure it got like a couple likes and I didn't know what I was doing back then, but now it's taken off.
Man, it's crazy. We've had recently, we had an influencer make a video on us on TikTok that had 3 million views. An influencer on YouTube do a video that had 13 million views telling my story. We have a Facebook video from Attention that had 30 million views. So it's nuts. And so many of those are just other folks telling our story, and all of a sudden, 10, 15, 30 million views is nuts.
That's cool. Yeah. That's cool.
And you opened up our IG. That's cool.
we'll get into it too, but do you guys have like analytics on the Mike Rowe Dirty Jobs episode and like what that entails? Because that's got to be insane exposure.
Not yet, right? Just came out in December, and we will start to gain some of those analytics. Anecdotally, we've seen, I think the night it ran, we had a 4,000% increase on our website. So immediately we had a pretty large bump. And so we'll start to kind of dig in on some of that. We've had a lot of inbound volunteers and a lot of other folks that have reached out. We've made the facility as seen on Dirty Jobs. Our thought is this may be one of the only Dirty Jobs episodes that somebody can actually go do. So how many Dirty Jobs episodes can you watch and then say, well, I'm going to go, clean out sewage or go, unless you're doing that job, you can't. But at Clean the World, you can come do every single thing that Mike Rowe did at Clean the World during that episode. So it's kind of cool.
I love it. That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool.
So we'll get into like all that. Why don't we start at the beginning? So before Clean the World, we can start as far back as you want, even growing up and kind of what led you to your point, your first career. And then from there, we can just kick it off to Clean the World, which is the topic of the day, of course.
I'm an entrepreneur. That's what I did. I remember when I was 7 or 8, we lived in Arlington. My family moved around quite a bit, but we were in Arlington when breakdancing was popular. My friends and I wanted to put a breakdancing routine on for an after-school center next door to us. Maybe I was 10 or 11 that had girls there. I remember us wanting to breakdance for the girls. So we needed to buy batteries and we needed batteries for the boombox. Well, I opened up a lemonade stand in my little neighborhood, and then a bunch of other lemonade stands popped up. So then I added popcorn, and other people added popcorn. And then I added cookies. Other people added cookies. Well, my grandfather was one of the first employees at Disney World, and he used to send me, he was executive chef at Fort Wilderness. He'd send me little Mickey Mouse trinkets and things. So then I merchandised Disney product. And I just blew everybody away in the neighborhood, and not only bought the batteries, but also bought a brand new boombox for us to go next door. And, when I was 13, I had a lawn mowing business and babysitting and car washing and all that stuff. So I was always an entrepreneur. Early 20s, I got into technology sales, was selling technology ERP systems to trucking companies across the United States when I was living in Houston. Had my first 6-figure year at the age of 21, bought my first house, had my first convertible. And I dropped out of college at that time.
I was going to say, because you went to Houston, right? And so you dropped out.
That was my 6th college.
Okay.
And at that time, I started making, for me, so much money. And after I would sell these systems, there was a whole training component. I could make extra money by driving or flying out to Tupelo, Mississippi, or Tuscaloosa, Alabama, or Atlanta, Georgia, to train these trucking companies on the software. So at that point, going to night school and, just did not make sense. So, so I got into tech sales at 21.
Wow.
And was operating technology all the way up to 15 years ago, when I was the vice president of sales for a tech company by the name of Channel Intelligence, who Google actually bought just a few years ago for $175 million. But I ran global sales, myself and another gent. We ran global sales, and I was on the road 4 nights a week. We were doing web and technology and data feed sales to consumer, to manufacturers and retailers in consumer electronics and computing, some personal care. So I was on the retail side, and Target and Best Buy were my 2 biggest clients. So they're headquartered in Minneapolis. I am a Southern Florida born, thin-blooded Floridian.
Same here. We're both Florida guys.
So, if you're spending 40 nights a year in Minneapolis, you're going to die.
Can't even imagine.
Right? And so that's what I did. So I spent a lot of time in my hotel room bundled up and drinking a cocktail. By the way, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, Jets.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, I lived in Pennsylvania after college, and I lasted a touch over a year. Way too cold. No shot. Exactly.
I moved to Chicago when I was 15, had never seen snow. And it was like the coldest winter they had in 60 years when I moved there. And I remember the first time my dad told me to come shovel the driveway, and woke me up. I'm 15, and I'm like, what the hell is this, man? This is stupid, And so I have dear friends, and I love Chicago, and I love Wisconsin, where I also lived. But anyway, relocated back to Central Florida, thin-blooded. Now I'm in Minneapolis all the time. So yeah, I'm sitting in a hotel room one night, drinking cocktails and staying warm, and always had this entrepreneurial kind of, I want to do something on my own. And at that time, it was really heating up. I was making a lot of money. We were driving towards a sale, kind of an exit at some point. I was making the company a lot of money, the execs a lot of money, myself a lot of money, but I wanted to do something on my own. And that's kind of when I started thinking about what happens to certain items of waste, in a hotel room, and kind of took it from there.
Wow. So do you remember the night specifically?
I do. And I remember the hotel. I stayed at a Holiday Inn that was right next to the Mall of America. It was the same exact one I was at all the time. So they knew me. So I was always down at the bar and whatever. So I remember in that room that night, looking at the bar of soap and the bottle of shampoo, and just wondering, man, when I go, because a normal week for me was fly to Chicago on Monday, Minneapolis on Tuesday, LA on Wednesday, Thursday, maybe take a red eye back on Friday. So I was usually 3 or 4 cities in a 4-day period. So as I went from city to city, I was not taking the soap and shampoo, and I only used it for one night, and that's what I started to wonder what happened to it. So I called the front desk, and they know me, and I'm like, I'm a few drinks into it at this point. And I'm like, so what happens to the soap when I'm done with it? And they just laughed and said, why don't you have another cocktail? And
it's a fair response.
Yeah. To which I said, brilliant idea. So go ahead and send that up. But no, really, what happens, when we're done drinking, done with the soap? And they said, we throw it away. And I specifically remember going to my laptop saying, okay, if all hotels threw their soap away, let's go do some research. There were 4.6 million hotel rooms in the US at that point. It was about a 60% average occupancy rate, and it was like a 1.2 average night stay. And I just sort of did back of envelope math, and I'm like, wow, all hotels are throwing their soap away. We're throwing away 1 million bars of soap every day. And that was the first, when the cocktail came up, started going, man, there's a lot of soap being thrown away, and that was sort of how it started.
So did you, after that moment, was that something you immediately acted on, or did you kind of store that one away and revisit it down the road?
I thought that was really interesting. And just without knowing anything about soap, thought there has to be an easy way to recycle soap, So I remember going home and telling 2 people about it. One was my uncle, who lived in Altamont at an apartment complex facing the Embassy Suites over there by the Altamont Mall. And literally he was looking out the window, looking at this Embassy Suites, and had just watched a show, The Next Big Idea, that Donnie Deutsch was doing. That they were saying, you got to come up with these next big ideas. And he's sitting on the phone going, there's something here. This could be big. I don't know what there's a soap. What can we do with this? And I'm like, I don't know. And then I called another guy who was very close friends with, who worked for me, and said the same thing. And we had all sort of done some quick research and figured out that we could recycle soap, that we could melt it down and reform it into new bars. And so immediately, when I say immediately, days and weeks, but in a pretty short period of time, like, okay, what are we going to do with it? But that it was pretty quick that we were, for whatever reason, soap being thrown away and knowing that we could recycle it just started to really stir inside of us, like there's something we can do with it.
And so, and what year was this, by the way?
2008 was when I was sort of in that hotel room, November, December timeframe.
Right.
And then this all carried into 2009, which is when we eventually launched the company.
How did it work? Kind of walk us through where clearly you were doing very well, making a good amount of money, happy in those terms, had this itch forever that this could be it to scratch it. But and doing some research, what was the timeline and what made you say, this is it? Because, 99% of people could have that same thought, but they don't act on it.
The first big question, which kind of led to taking this really next big step, was, okay, we can recycle soap. What are we going to do with recycled soap? And we thought through selling it. First of all, I did some case studies with my friends, some user groups. I said, would you buy recycled soap from a retail store? And they were like, hell no. And so then we're like, well, could we sell it international? And then we're like, well, is it cool if people in the US don't want to buy it international, but don't want to buy it used soap, but we'll sell it to folks international. And through this process, we found one study and then a second and a third. It ended up being like 10 of these studies that all said that back then in 2009, there were 9,000 children under the age of 5 dying every day to pneumonia and diarrheal disease. Number 1 and number 2 leading cause of death amongst children worldwide. And all these studies showed that if we just gave them soap and taught them how and when to wash their hands, we could cut those deaths in half. And so I distinctly remember the night that I was sitting on my bed in East Orlando. At that time I was on the 13th hole at the Stony Brook East golf course. I've got a couple homes. I got the biggest 750 on the block. I'm feeling good about myself. And I got all these studies laid out. And I'm like, wait a second. There's 1 million bars of soap being thrown away every day. And there's 9,000 children dying every day. And all I've got to do is figure out how to get the bars of soap. And the recycling part was easy. Get that recycled soap into the hands of those children. At the time, I've got 4 young children, wife, and that was really when this entire stir inside of me, like this whole kind of moment of obligation. I was reared in a Christian home. My father's a businessman, but he's an ordained Baptist minister. He writes books on Christian communication in the workplace. And I just have this stir inside of me like, whoa, there's something like morally good and strong here that can come in. And really the desire to have a great company that made tons of money and those types of things kind of took a backseat to this. So when I was young, my favorite superhero was Robin Hood. I loved Robin Hood, taken from the rich, given to the poor. I just loved the way he did things. And I just had this Robin Hood thing. Man, we throw away millions of bars of soap across the United States like it's nothing. Yet 9,000 children every day die around the world who just don't have soap. It seemed to me like a rich and poor, like a Robin Hood type scenario. And it was like, well, that's what we're going to do. So when that became, I'm going to figure that out. I'm in my early 30s. I'm making a ton of money. You never think in your early 30s making a ton of money that you're never not going to make a ton of money. I did it when I was 21. So I always was able to make and earn. Didn't know what we were about to go through, but it definitely at that time just seemed like, oh, this will be easy, and then jumped way into some murky water and had no idea how deep it was, and struggled, but here we are.
I'm jumping ahead here, but you said the studies said hygiene related deaths would drop 50%. What are the stats now that you've done this for so long?
In 14 years, we've distributed 75 million free bars of soap to children, families, mothers in 127 countries across the globe. The death rate, children under the age of 5 dying of hygiene related illnesses, decreased by more than 60%. Because of that, the United Nations put us on the United Nations Global Wash Cluster. So we drive global strategies on water, sanitation, hygiene. We've literally saved millions of children's lives. So it worked.
Clearly a big problem too in this is teaching them to wash their hands, and all, like distributing is one thing, getting it there is one thing, but there's a whole education around that. I feel like too that
when we first launched, the idea was get soap from hotels, recycle it, distribute it. Distribute it's a big cost. We found partners like World Vision, Children International, Samaritan's Purse, these large NGOs that were in a bunch of countries who are already doing wash programming and feeding and developing water purification and sanitization, water insecurity, and they needed soap. They were procuring soap anyway. So it was very easy for us to give them the soap, put it in their programs. They would report back to us on how many people were served, how many children were being impacted, et cetera. The education being such a big piece of it, as we went on and we started to gather our own legs to become a company that could do it ourselves, we started to develop our own wash programming and education. So every one of those, by the way, the 50% is you knock out half the deaths with soap. You knock out the other half by clean water. Add clean water and soap, and you eliminate, for the most part, that atrocious death rate too. You eliminate diarrheal disease, and you basically can eliminate pneumonia to the extent that you can not pass it from one to another with dirty water and with lack of proper hygiene. But eventually, over a few years, we started doing our own education and going into schools, teaching children how and when to wash their hands. Once they learn and demonstrate how to wash their hands and when, we give them soap to give their families. They teach their families, and then we measure the success in those areas. So we've done that in Punta Cana, in Haiti, in Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, the Philippines, Bihar State, India, and we see the results all the way across the board when we do it ourselves. So yeah, it's simple.
It's unreal.
Yeah.
So let's jump back to the early days, because I've seen the machinery and equipment you all use now. I'm going to go out on a limb and say you did not have that in the early days.
We did not. That's right. We did not. So in 2009, when I decided I was going to do this, first thing I was doing is I ran a sales team, and I needed to recycle soap and learn how to do it in my own kitchen. So I used to have my sales executives, guys and gals who were making like $250,000 a year. You know, I used to make them, when they'd show up for their business meetings in the morning in some random city, bring their used soap. And actually, I remember having a buddy of mine, I used to make him run into hotel rooms when the room attendants were in there. He'd run in and grab the dirty soap and bring it out. So if you can imagine, most of these guys end up getting contracts at Google after the acquisition. So at one point during their career, they were told by me to run into rooms and get dirty and use soap so that I could take it back to my kitchen and use a food processor and a baking pan and figure out how to make it.
Yeah, shout out to the clean the world pioneers.
Yeah,
exactly. Eventually, I'm half German, half Puerto Rican, so I'd love to tell this story. I called my German family members, and I told them about this great idea I had to collect soap from hotels, recycle it, send it people around the world. They told me, do not quit your day job. You know, this is 2009. By the way, global economy is crashing at this point, right? So I call my Puerto Rican family members. I change the pitch up a little bit, and I tell them, we're going to take soap, recycle it, and save children's lives. And they're like, we're totally in. So if you can imagine myself and my Puerto Rican family members, we're in a single car garage. We're all sitting around on upside down pickle buckets with potato peelers. We're collecting used bars of soap from hotels across Orlando. We're taking the soap. We're using a potato peeler to surface clean it. We've got a meat grinder. We grind it up into a meat grinder. We had 4 Kenmore cookers. I remember buying them on sale at Sears for $79. Actually, we bought them for $59.99. They were regularly priced $79.99. So it was an $80 savings in total across those 4 cookers. So we would cook the grinded soap into a paste, which would also cook all the impurities out of it. We made these big wood soap molds. We put some wax paper down, take the paste, put the paste on, more wax paper, top it, clamp it. It would dry overnight. The next day we had wire cutters, and we put slits in the wood. So we would slit the soap through to cut it. We would take that soap, put it on racks behind us. We had fans blowing that dry for another 24 hours. The power would cut in the house every 30 minutes, which stopped the music, which stopped my Puerto Rican workforce completely from working, because if you didn't have the salsa and merengue playing, you were done. So I had to figure out how many cookers plus meat grinder plus music would be on to work. And all day we would hustle to make like 500 bars of soap. And very true story, the first time the police came by the garage, they wanted to see what all of us Puerto Ricans were cooking. And to their surprise, we were cooking soap. Wow. And that's how we started in that garage.
That's amazing. And you got to think too, at what point were you like, were you confident the full time? Were you like, what are we doing? Like, we're just
no,
this
100%.
whole process.
Not confident. Here's the mix of emotion that happened. On one hand, this is the greatest global impact idea. This is the number 1 and number 2 killers of children worldwide. All these studies say give them soap. We're throwing away millions of bars of soap every day across the globe, right? This is easy. So it's when people hear it and they understand it and they see it, it's going to make so much sense. At the time, Bill Gates was tackling diarrheal disease. So I remember us filling out a 18-page grant application and filling every detail in weeks on end to do it, submitting it. And I remember us getting the rejection notice in 8 hours. And it said, please don't reapply for 3 years. At the time, I'm used to selling multi-million-dollar tech deals, ROI calculator. I'm bringing in, operational engineers. We're selling big deals. Now I'm begging people for $50 a month to support a mission, and it's not working. All of the money that we had, we're going through it. I'm going through kids' college funds, going through 401k, going through it all. So on one hand, I'm saying this idea is phenomenal. On the other hand, I'm spending a lot of money trying to make it happen, and it's not happening. At one point, my wife's car got repossessed, lost a home. Remember power get cut in my house a couple times and, begging my parents to help, which wasn't much of a beg, just asking my parents to help get the lights back on. So I went from early 30s, top of the world, the whole 9 to within 6, 7, 8 months, it snowdived, it nosedived. So 2 big points that help that. So you're in this whole dilemma. Right. This should happen. And hotels were gladly giving us free soap, giving us their soap for free. We weren't charging them. We didn't have a business model. People are taking it from us. And then in July of 2009, I went on my first international trip to Haiti. So I go to Cape Haitian, Haiti, which is a 45-minute plane ride, quicker plane ride to get to Haiti than it is to get to Washington, D.C. Poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, 70% unemployment rate. As I drive from the airport to the church, I mean, there's people defecating outside. It's just, and I come into this church and there's 10,000 Haitians on a Wednesday afternoon, and moms are coming up one after the other talking about how they buried children because they didn't have proper hygiene. And it's hitting you and you're like, this is a stone's throw away from where I'm at. So that one lit a fire inside of me, like, I'm going to bring you millions of bars of soap. Like, we're going to solve this. It also helped with I don't need to have everything in the world, but it still didn't solve the fact that I had to feed my family and I had to, so those are all the emotions that were going on. And we ended up having some breaks that made it, happen for us. But it was, if not for the fact that I knew, absolutely without a doubt that we were saving people's lives, there were 20 off ramps that I could have had that I would have backed out.
I was going to say, anyone else in that situation is going to tap out at that point, even though they're, getting to the bottom personal, financially kind of wise. They would just take one of those off ramps, like you're saying. But it was just that mission. It was the mission, and it was going to Haiti. It was being face to face with Haitians and mothers and children, and seeing the conditions and knowing how close it was to us, and saying this isn't right, and knowing that that's literally soap and education would save their lives.
So what did the distribution to Haiti look like? Because that sounds like it was the first big inflection point for you all.
Yeah, well, we flew 2,000 bars of soap in a back of a DC-3, so prop 1940s airplane, flew over the Bermuda Triangle. Pilots are messing with us when we're going over the Bermuda Triangle, which is not cool at all. And we land in Cape Haitian. We had to circle the runway once because there was a cow on the runway. They got the cow off. We land. They load a truck up, and when they're loading, you're kind of in, call it, population on the other side of the, in the airport, and people are just begging. You get into a car. We drove directly from the airport to the church, and we came to the back of this church. And most buildings in Haiti do not have a roof put on them because once you put a roof on, you have to pay taxes. So this church, and if you ever come to our global headquarters, we have a soap museum here, world's largest soap museum, and we have pictures of this distribution. We have pictures of us in the garage. We have the actual potato peelers. Like, you get to see the history of all this. And so I walk in through the back of this church and I look out and there's 10,000 people. We've got 2,000 bars of soap. There's 10,000 people. And so it was oh man, we don't have enough soap for everybody. Oh my God, what are we doing here? Like, this is crazy. Like, we need to help. And then when we went up on stage, and Pastor Julio Brutus, who helped make this connection for us, he starts bringing women up and interpreting what they're saying about, I've buried one child and two children, and we have not had soap and hygiene. And you're hearing the story, and it's just, I remember the emotions of like, oh my God, man, I'm going to have to figure this out. It's like the Robin Hood thing, we're going to bring more soap. And that's all I said was, I'm sorry, we only have 2,000 bars. We will bring you more soap. I promise we will be back. And when we handed the soap out to the first couple rows, everybody dug into it like it was food and they hadn't eaten in weeks. And it just sat inside of me that we have to come back here and this is what we have to do. And that just, that turned off all off ramps. There's no more off ramps now. Now we're going to go figure this out. And that helped drive us to create a business model. It ended up leading to, so here's the other cool thing that happened because of that. The local Fox 35 and David Martin out here went and documented that trip and did a piece on us. That piece ran in local Orlando market, and then it ran on the local Fox market in New York, to which the night it ran, Katie Couric, senior producer, was watching the local Fox that night and saw the story. And that's how we get a call from Katie Couric saying, we want to go do the same thing. And that was when the H1N1 flu virus was happening. So I say this to people all the time. If you're, especially because I talk to college students and just a lot of folks on kind of this whole social entrepreneurship, creating a company that helps people and gives back and makes a difference in the world. I feel like if you're doing that with a pure heart and just with all the passion in the world, that breaks are going to happen for you. Whatever you want to call it, stars, God, the heavens, whatever. Things are going to break your way. And that was a break that went our way. All of a sudden, Katie Couric calls. They come down. At the time, I'm flirting with this business model whereby hotels pay us to do this recycling, right? There's a value here. It's sustainability. It's social impact. We're delivering soap back to countries where your employees are from. So there's a human resource element. So I'm starting to toy around with that. CBS Evening News calls us. We're getting ready to cut a deal with the Peabody, which is now the Hyatt by the convention center, but it was the Peabody with the ducks and all that. I call them and say, look, I'll put you on CBS Evening News if you pay for our program and you shout from the mountaintops. You tell every hotel in the world that's the best thing that you could have ever paid for. And Alan Villaverde was the president at the time. Marshall Kelberman was the guy who signed that deal. Signed the deal. I remember getting the first check for $357 with the little ducks on top. I remember just crying and getting emotional thinking about it right now. I was just bawling because a sales guy like me sees that check from the Peabody, and I'm like, I can get a lot more of those. I know I can. Boom, we do CBS Evening News. It's a big hit, right? All these hotels start calling us. And then 3 months later, the Haiti earthquake happens, January 12, 2010. I happen to be back in Haiti handing soap out. CBS calls me again while I'm down there, documents me handing soap out, calls me the Pied Piper of soap, and the phones start ringing after that, and they've never stopped. And the company just went hockey stick right after that. We've sent 3 million bars of soap back to those people in that church since the day that and those were the breaks and the things that had to happen for us to make it where we are today.
So from that point, now that you have the backing, the capital, how do you scale up from here? And then what does that scale up look like?
We launched as a nonprofit. This is 501c3. I didn't know any better. What the mentality was back in 2009, and for many even today, is if you do something good, you do a mission, you're a nonprofit. If you're all about making money, you're a for-profit. Okay, well, there's convergence happening now, right? Millennials, Gen Z, the integration of corporate responsibility, now your for-profit companies better have a cause,
Right.
better help people.
I spent the last several years working in sustainable investing for a while. And so I totally get what you're saying. And back, like we were talking about earlier with your first social media,
Yes.
it was pitting the hotels against each other, showing them what the other one's doing, how much soap they're donating.
That's it. It's absolutely. And recently the SEC said that they are now auditing all publicly traded companies' ESG claims, environmental, social governance. You can't just make a claim now and let it sit on your earnings report. That can be audited by the SEC now. What a place we have come from 10 years ago, right? So back 14 years ago, we're a nonprofit. Well, now the phones start ringing off the hook. So now I need to scale the company. Well, 2009 financial disasters happened, right, globally. So I can't get bank loans because no one wants to donate. First of all, I cannot get any donations. I'm not good at that at all. Secondly, and as we started to get hotels on board and signing contracts with us, folks who donated, donors would say, well, you already have people bringing, you already have contracts with hotels. Why do you need my support? So that did not work very well. Banks did not want to loan money to us. So I had to introduce a for-profit somehow. So basically around 09 and 10, I introduced a for-profit as a staffing company that worked inside of the nonprofit with the idea that as the nonprofit gained more contracts, added more hotels, and grew its revenue, the staffing company inside of it would gain more employees and more revenue. That allowed us to start opening up some banking lines, right? And then, of course, 09 turns to 10 and 11 and 12, and so the economy starts to get a lot better. We flipped that model about 6 or 7 years ago because of the emergence of B Corps. So B Corps, for-profit companies that have a social or environmental mission written into its charters and bylaws. Patagonia is a B Corp. Ben & Jerry's is a B Corp. First Climate Bank here in Central Florida, they're a B Corp. That convergence of business and impact allowed us to become Florida's first B Corp. So I actually testified at the Senate Rules Committee when it was being passed in the state of Florida. We got 5 subcommittees, House and Senate, not a single no vote. And in 2013, we became Florida's first B Corp when Governor Scott signed it into law on July 1. And July 3rd, we were the first B Corp in the state of Florida. That made a big difference. That allowed us to take our revenue creating contracts, put them into a for-profit that has a mission, which is supporting our global hygiene, efforts. And that then opened up investors and, debt loans and the ability to raise capital. And so that's how we've been able to take it to scale now. And so today I've got about 100 employees around the world. We have recycling operational centers in Orlando, Vegas, Montreal, Punta Cana, Amsterdam, Hong Kong. We operate across the Caribbean, North America. We have hotel partners in Singapore, Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, Japan, across the entire EU, UK. And we're thriving, as a business, new product lines, the whole nine. But it took us figuring out the company corporate structure and how to play around with the nonprofit for-profit. We're a hybrid today. So we have all of our 501c3 efforts, nonprofit efforts roll up to Clean the World Foundation, our 501c3, and all of our for-profit efforts run up to CTW Global LLC, which is our for-profit B Corp, and they work together.
I've brought up COVID in most of our conversations we've had because I think it's a massive inflection point for everyone.
Yeah.
With you specific, I can see it being both a positive and a large negative. Positive as in hygiene is the forefront of people's minds. Negative, no one's traveling. So they're not using soap and hygiene related products.
Yes, exactly what you said. COVID was a complete brain dichotomy, just blast. These wash your hands, bro shirts that you're wearing, okay? We created these shirts 6 years ago. We were the inventors of the wash your hands, bro shirt.
Really?
When COVID hit, well, what was the number one thing they were telling everybody to do?
Right here. Wash your hands.
Wash your hands, okay? At the same time, our two largest revenue lines were hotels paying us and the meetings and events and convention business paying us for hygiene kit builds. What happened to both of those? Sunk. So our revenue dried up immediately. no more inbound revenue, yet the whole world is telling everybody to wash their hands. And I'm losing my mind. In April of 20, like millions of other companies, I had 2 rounds of layoffs, and I laid off 85% of the employees. We had every bit of soap that we had in our facility. We said, we're just going to get it out to anybody and everybody we can to be on the front lines of, of stopping the spread. And I remember just being emotional. I can't believe this is how we're going to die. This thing's never going to come back. And I actually had, this is crazy, but so we did a couple things, and then I'll tell you this like aha moment I had drinking actually one weekend. Funny how it all comes back to that sometimes. So we have another big product line, which is hygiene kit builds. So meetings, events, conventions, people come together, they do a team building activity, they have assembly lines, and they build hygiene kits to donate to those in need. Okay. That was the other business line that went dead. So we converted that to an at-home box, and we put everything in a box so companies could purchase these boxes for their employees. And while all the kids were staying at home and everybody was locked in your home, a box could arrive at your door. On your kitchen table, you could build 50 or 100 hygiene kits that you could donate to your local food pantry, local homeless shelter, whatever. And that ended up taking off. We also at that time had launched a mobile hygiene unit, which was a 40-foot hygiene trailer that was in Las Vegas. The Las Vegas Sands was sponsoring. That was showing remarkable results in Las Vegas. When a lot of the federal dollars came in with the COVID CARES Act, municipalities were looking for ways to help their homeless populations and their underprivileged, underserved populations to get access to soap and hygiene kits and to take showers. So we started really promoting that with those federal dollars. Okay. Right around that time when just before it started taking off, I remember just saying, the whole thing's going to die. I can't believe it. And I started drinking some whiskey one night, and I binge watched Tiger King. Man, I watched it and I was going, this crazy son of a bitch, if this guy will go to all the lengths that he will go to save his business, I will not, this pandemic will not kill me. And I took inspiration from him. And I remember how funny that was because when we got the boxes out, I remember Bacardi was one of the first companies who was a longtime partner of ours who purchased all the boxes for their employees. And I did a virtual. And so this is when Zoom was starting to take off. And so now we're doing virtual keynotes. So I did a bunch of virtual keynotes. And I remember being alongside the CEO of Bacardi and telling him the story of Tiger King to all the employees and how that inspired us, to which he says, that's exactly what inspired me at our company and how we ended up turning things around, this and that. So we had this awesome moment. We had like 400 of their employees on a virtual. They're all with these boxes at their home and they're building these hygiene kits. And the Soap Save Live boxes took off. And it was awesome. And so we ended up coming through it. Shortly after that, the CDC engaged with Clean the World Foundation to start measuring what was going on in the homeless populations with respect to COVID. So we started putting hand washing stations up, doing surveys to study the spread of the disease, the virus in those in the municipalities that they had us in. So we ended up pivoting and came out of it the strongest we've ever been, the largest we've ever been in. 2021 ended up being the greatest year in the history of our company, and we now have 3 viable, excellent product lines. And when we were having those COVID waves, the meetings and events convention business, they were going like they'd have on-site meetings, and then it would go to virtual meetings, and it would come back to on-site, and then there were hybrids. Well, because of our Soap Save Live boxes, we could do both. And we were the only company in the world that was able to do that. So Amazon grew to an amazing, they're our number one, we're a strategic partner with them. We're doing hygiene kit builds with their employees from their homes to their distribution centers across the globe. We're building hygiene kits that we're sending into Ukraine to folks in Eastern Ukraine to help them with their needs. We're sending them for Somalian refugees and Syrian refugees and southern border of the U.S. And when hurricanes hit and typhoons hit. And so it has ended up being a blessing the way we were able to react to it and, come out of it at this point.
So we usually ask people, what's your why? I think it's clear what yours is. So we won't ask that question. So I think my other question is, where do you go from here? Because I think Y'all's exposure has already been incredible, but we haven't talked about your most recent kind of media appearance on Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe.
Yeah.
And so I'd imagine a lot more people are going to become aware of what you all are doing. So talk a little bit about that, and then maybe lead into what Clean the World looks like in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and by the way, depending on when this airs, on February 17th, tune into the Kelly Clarkson show, because we'll be on the Kelly Clarkson show as well. What does the future look like for us? Number one, there are hotels in every region, every part of the globe. So we want to get our hotel soap and bottle amenity recycling program operating in the Middle East. We've been trying to get into mainland China. We were very close to launching right before COVID in mainland China. That has delayed. We think it's opening up now to where we can launch in mainland China, Australia. So we want to grow it. The hotels are going through a change. So there's less bar soap and there's more plastic. So we are now taking that plastic, recycling it, turning it into new products. We want to see where that's going to go. We want to turn it into products that can help within the foundation's new 10-year mission, which is to solve water insecurity. So water purification systems, water purification technologies. Can we bring the recycled plastic into components or, filters that we're creating? So we're looking at that. And, in terms of our meetings and events, which is the hygiene kit builds, we want to start feeding the hungry. So by this year, the end of this year, we'll launch meal kitting so that companies can come together and pack meal kits. They could do both. We clean hands, full bellies, so they can pack hygiene kits while putting meal kits together. We also do backpacks. So we think we can also take backpacks with hygiene kits and with meals and put them together. We're hearing from a lot of teachers that have received our backpacks that have hygiene items in it and saying that's a new must in schools. When schools start, they need hygiene products. Kids need hand sanitizer, they need soap, and a lot of underprivileged and underserved communities, they're just trying to get the paper and the pens and the pencils and not necessarily the hygiene items. So we see growth there. And then I mentor a lot of, and I teach, I've lectured at Harvard and universities in China and in Europe on social entrepreneurship, inspiring young people to create great companies that make a difference in the world and that help solve social or environmental ills. So I want to keep doing that, keep trying to inspire folks to be able to start companies like ours.
So on a more individual level, what can we be doing as travelers or just, citizens of Orlando to help your cause? And we're a very much a Central Florida centric podcast here. So how can people help?
Yep.
Hands-on or financially or whatever that might be.
Yeah, without a doubt. So first of all, come to our facility, come volunteer. We have volunteer groups.
I've done it
all the time. Yeah, it's awesome. Yesterday we had 200 volunteers from Lake Highland Prep. So we had two sessions and, they're out, getting their hands dirty, recycling soap. So we like to say you could do what Mike Rowe did, from Dirty Jobs. So come to our facility, I think 5 days a week or 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday. We have volunteer groups. Corporations can come do it. Individuals, schools, everybody. You can do a hygiene kit build. So your company can engage with us to get all the items you need in order to build hygiene kits. And then you can donate them to a local homeless shelter, food pantry, women's shelter, whoever you want to support as well. So there's a double support there. You can go to our website at cleantheworld.org and support us financially, support Clean the World Foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. Tell hotels, we are travel tourism center of America, the world. And while we're traveling and out there, you should just ask the hotel when you're checking out, is your soap and bottles being recycled? If you're staying at any type of a Hilton property, Hilton, Hampton Inn, Homewood Suites, Doubletree, Embassy Suites, we have a brand standard with them. So every Hilton property in North America, in Europe is operating our program, but we don't have some other brands. So if you're staying in Marriott's and Hyatt's and Best Westerns and Wyndham's, we have many of their hotels, but we're trying to get brand standards with them and get all of their hotels. So talk to them about that and just spread the word, spread the word about Clean the World.
Absolutely. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but we're clearly all Orlando guys here. There had to be a huge kind of pickup to that hockey stick being based here in Orlando with all the hotels when you were first starting off too, I have to imagine.
For sure. And it started with Walt Disney World Resorts. We brought them on board shortly after the Haiti earthquake. And I remember for that year and a half before we had them, we would constantly say, if we don't get Walt Disney World resorts and we're located in Central Florida, what are we really doing? But as soon as we got them, these things took off. So kudos to them and so many hotels and resorts across Central Florida that have, partnered with us. But right, it's a big thing. Now we also opened up a facility in Las Vegas. So we have the majority as well, by the way, of the Las Vegas Strip. And we say that, everything that happens in Vegas doesn't necessarily stay in Vegas anymore, with our stuff. But I will say this about the Central Florida community. Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer went to the Dominican Republic with us, put a cape on, pretended to be Super Jabón, and Super Jabón and Super Agua were fighting the Hermanes. And so we went from community center to community center. He introduces himself as Mayor Buddy Dyer. The women there, the children there who have family members in Orlando,
Right.
Florida, are like, this is the mayor of Orlando that's here. And he's teaching them how to wash their hands and when, and he's handing them out. He got a ton of kisses, by the way, when he was there. It was just a little uncomfortable for some of us. But, so the support in this community, Mayor Demings has gone to ribbon cuttings for us with our mobile hygiene unit, which launched in Central Florida, which gives showers out. Mayor Jacobs was so supportive. Even, Rob Pinnapinto, we talked about, ran for mayor. The point is this: the local politics, local government, the community, the folks that we've mentioned, here, Rollins and UCF, the Orlando Chamber, the Hispanic Chamber, the African American Chamber, Black Chamber of Commerce. I've spoken at every one of them. They're so supportive. This community is supportive, and I talk about that. It's inclusive. And it's inclusive and supportive for entrepreneurs and for folks who have great ideas. There are so many resources around here. If you're a social entrepreneur, Rally is an awesome place to go where you can be mentored, and you can even have the investors here in Central Florida. They look to make social impact and environmental impact investments. So this is an awesome community. If you've got a great idea, whether it's an impact idea or just a regular idea, let's say regular, but a non-impact idea or what have you, this is a great community to accelerate that. And I talk about that around the world. It's a community with heart, and that heart is also for just sort of helping your neighbor, and helping them come up. And so we would not have accelerated and been at the place that we are today if not for the fact that we launched right here in Orlando and in Central Florida.
Love to hear that.
That
literally gets us fired up.
We've had these conversations, and it always ends like this with us talking about Central Florida.
Right.
And it's mostly been from an entrepreneurial perspective. And we've said that Orlando seems to finally be getting its own identity.
Right.
And I think how individuals rallied around your cause is a perfect representation of what that identity is.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
we were nothing when the Haiti earthquake happened, and our facility were just loaded with people who were just trying to help. And it just found us and showed up, and we're helping. And it has not stopped since that moment. And it's awesome. Yeah,
That's cool.
Shawn, we love to hear about your success. We appreciate what you've done for our community, and for what you've done for the world and the millions you've saved. So really appreciate you taking the time to be here. And
my pleasure.
Yeah,
This is
thank
awesome.
you. Thank
you
you
very much. Very much appreciate it. It's very good to spend time with you guys.